Let's get stuck into this, shall we? Welcome along to a very special edition of The Late Show Live on GBNews. President Trump, of course, is known as the Peace President, but the new key fired at the BBC on Friday night has now landed, and it sparks the resignation of Davey and Turness at the BBC. Well, tonight, the White House has issued a stern warning to the rest of the fake news mainstream media. Press Secretary Caroline Levitt has said BBC News is dying because they are anti-Trump fake news. Everyone, said Levitt, should watch GBNews. Well, Bev Turner has the full story, and she's with me now in the Late Show Live studio. Bev, nice to see you. What a day.
Evening.
What a 48 hours.
What a 48 hours. What a week, really, Ben. And I think it's worth just reflecting on how we've got to this point, because it's been a bit of a whirlwind for us as journalists in the White House this week and in Washington, D.C., because on Monday, Gordon Rayner started Late Show Live with me. Now, he's a Daily Telegraph journalist who had exposed this dossier. And he talked about the Trump clip that we've now seen many, many times, the Panorama documentary that cast Donald Trump as inciting the insurrection. That was on the front page of the British papers on Tuesday. I was in the briefing room on Tuesday with the Telegraph journalists, with the Mail journalists, with the Express, all the people from the UK, and we were waiting for a statement from Caroline Levitt. We got nothing. Then on Wednesday, the news of the Gaza coverage from that same dossier emerged. Again, nothing from the White House. Thursday, the way that they had depicted the trans issue was exposed. Nothing from the White House. Now, we were all, as British journalists, curious, because this isn't their MO, is it? They don't hold back. They come out swinging if they don't agree with something. And then on Friday, you had Rob Crilly, the journalist from Telegraph, in the studio here, who had broke the story. So this has been a Telegraph story from Monday. And Rob said that Gary Donoghue, the BBC's broadcaster here in Washington, their anchor, their political editor, had been in the White House. So the clock was then ticking. What were they going to say? How was this going to be treated by the White House? And on Friday, Caroline Levitt came out and she said this was purposefully dishonest, selectively editing by the BBC. It is evidence they are 100% fake news. Still nothing from the president. He goes to Florida for the weekend. Yesterday, nothing. And then today, we hear of the resignation of Tim Davey and Deborah Turner, head of BBC News. 6 p.m. statement UK time on a Sunday. They've had a busy weekend, clearly working out what to say. And then I was with you today at lunch, and I had been messaging the White House, of course, all week about this, because we were all very keen for a response. And Caroline Levitt gave me this quote that I think we can use. And she says, the White House proudly called out their purposeful fake news, that's BBC, of course, and this resignation is an admission of guilt. And she then added the line, everyone should watch GBNews. Now, I promise you I did not ask her to say that, but obviously as a journalist that works for a channel of which I'm incredibly proud, that was very rewarding. She's clearly a very wise woman. And now I think there are so many questions, Ben, that need to be asked about why this, why now?
I'd like to know why they waited so long, because you and I and other British journalists this side of the pond were scratching our heads in the week saying, why hasn't the White House responded to this initial, very good Daily Telegraph story about Panorama? It was silence, and it was kind of like, what are they doing? Are they waiting? What's your thoughts on why
I think that they were allowing the BBC to leave, or for the personnel within the BBC to leave with as much dignity as possible. I genuinely think that was the president behaving admirably, and he could have come out and demanded the resignation. He didn't do it. They kept quiet. I'm sure they knew what was going on behind the scenes, and then these two major figures at the BBC have gone. But I think what's really important, because what we're about to see now is a pile on with a lot of the left, a lot of the establishment, capitally establishment media in the UK, to depict this as Donald Trump dictating the agenda. And we have to remember that this dossier exposed the BBC not just for depicting Donald Trump as something that he wasn't on that day. This was about the coverage of Gaza, the coverage of trans. We can think of so many issues that where with the BBC you get one version of events. Global warming is another one. How they feel about the Liz Truss premiership is another one. How they feel about the whole of the Trump administration in term 1 and term 2. How the BBC depicts the Pakistani rape gangs issue.
Yeah.
We know there are big stories that they do not deal with due impartiality. And that's the concern.
Yeah, the people today, the rhetoric is, the conversation is, especially from those of the left side of the argument, saying that the White House, President Trump, is getting involved in UK media affairs. Well, no, I mean, I'd argue President Trump was there reacting to something that was done to him, and really just gave the BBC just the slightest of nudge over the cliff they were already perilously hanging off for many, many years. You can go back, I don't just blame Tim Davie, but you can go back for decades. Look, Savile, Stu Edwards, the Glastonbury situation. You can go on and on and on. And I've been saying tonight, Bev, this is partly, and by the way, I'm not dancing on the BBC's grave tonight. I think it's actually quite a sad occasion that what was once a well-respected, proud British institution, I used to love the BBC, has now resorted to being called out by the President of the United States.
There are elements of the BBC that I do still love. I love some of their entertainment programming, some of their coverage this weekend of all of the remembrance services. The BBC does that beautifully. I mean, you might say with 50 million lots of 170 quid, they should do it beautifully. But they do some things well. When it comes to news, they have dropped the ball over the last however many years, and the British public no longer feel that they represent who they are. And that is the reason that GBNews is doing so well. Yeah. Because the people sat at home watching TV watch what we say and they go, I agree, I feel like that, you're representing my life. And the BBC no longer do that.
Big Tech has turned your phone into a surveillance device, harvesting your data, tracking your location, and selling your information to corporations. Unplugged built the upphone to fight back. It's the only smartphone with hardware-level privacy protection, completely blocking data harvesting at the source. It features a physical kill switch that cuts power instantly when you want to go dark, giving you control Big Tech took away. Unplugged puts privacy and sovereignty first. The upphone is built to British standards, designed to keep your data in your hands, with independent servers, its own app center, and no corporate gatekeepers. You can access what you choose. No censorship, no app bans, just freedom. Everyone else is playing by Big Tech's rules. Unplugged rewrote them. The upphone runs on an operating system with 0 backdoors and a firewall that blocks thousands of tracking attempts every single day. The upphone includes a host of unique security features. The device can be set to have its memory wiped regularly, and if someone demands your PIN code, well, you can give them a false PIN that will wipe the device. It's called emergency reset. Privacy isn't a feature with Unplugged, it is the foundation. To get yours today, click the link in the description now.
Show you and viewers back home and listeners a clip. Rob Crilly from the Daily Telegraph, the guy who initially penned that Panorama story a week or so ago, which kicked off this whole fiasco. Rob Crilly was on the Late Show Live on Friday, and he told me about the moment that the BBC's Gary O'Donoghue, one of their top Washington reporters here, very nice guy, nice chap, he was mysteriously in the White House on Friday, as you said, Bev. This is the moment Rob Crilly told me about that. We'll discuss it afterwards. Let's take a look.
Made an appointment. I went in, sat down on her sofa, very well appointed. She's moved offices, the fire was roaring, rather cosy atmosphere. And of course she was well aware of the story. And so as soon as I put it to her that, you know, there were questions to be answered by the BBC, she was only too happy. And she is a very slick operator. She knows how to give a good story. She knows the mind of the president as well. And she delivered, you read the quote there, I think she delivered a real sign of the fury of the White House in her response. And it was rather amusing.
Have the BBC been in and around the White House this week since the Panorama story dropped? And I mean, who's the is it Cassie Kay? They
have a whole slate of reporters. I mean, you also have Gary O'Donoghue, the reporter who got the interview with Trump actually earlier this year.
How have they been this week?
He was at the White House today, I noticed. I don't know if he was in for a meeting, for a dressing down, or quite what. Now, they come and go and do their reporting. They're part of the press pool. They may, for all I know, one of their radio correspondents may have been on Air Force One this evening. I suspect that would have been rather frosty.
So there we go, bit of a nugget of information there from Crilly. Gary O'Donoghue was in the White House mysteriously, he's not always in there. Do you think we can assume from this now that the BBC were dragged into the White House for a rollicking and then that's how we've ended up today?
I don't don't know. We might find out this week. We don't know what's gone on behind the scenes. I don't think, contrary to public opinion, that Donald Trump would have the power to get the DG kicked out, forcibly resign his job. I don't think so. But I think what it's also important to say is this is an opportunity for the BBC to really genuinely look at how they handle their news editorial. I know from people within the BBC newsroom that they have concerns that they can't relate to real people, partly because they're staffed maybe by a certain type of public school boy and girl. I don't know what it is, and I'm not sure they know what it is. But there is a groupthink mentality at the BBC. There is a certain type of person. Like, we will joke. We will joke, we'll never get a job on the BBC. Now, that shouldn't be a joke, because actually, all I want from the BBC, I don't want them to necessarily be pro-Trump or pro-conservative or pro-reform. And Nigel, there's another topic. You know exactly how the BBC are going to cover Nigel Farage and reform. I want both sides of every story. That is what the British people want, because if you don't show the British people both sides of every story, you're assuming the British people are stupid.
And do you know what else is quite alarming? I agree with you, by the way, but it's the reaction from certain BBC stars, or even the likes of Adam Bolton, former Sky News star presenter, who don't see and don't understand what the BBC have done wrong. People still saying, well, hang on a minute, Trump did incite this or that, or he was responsible for that. They don't understand or see the problem in splicing together two separate pieces of speech, 52 minutes apart, to make a man say something the complete opposite of what he did say. That's alarming, the reaction to it. Nick Robinson, John Simpson as well.
But that's the mindset that I'm talking about. Whether it's almost like on an individual level, I think there are people who work at the BBC that just don't want to be criticised by their peers. It's a crowd of people sometimes, I think, maybe in news, who they don't want to be judged. They're pretty scared of getting it wrong or saying the wrong thing and therefore being cast out or censored by their friendship group at the work or whatever it is. We don't suffer from that same sort of fear here. And so it gives rise to a kind of, we have an oxygenated news empire here at GB News. Like, it is, all views are welcome here. And we often get criticised. People will message the show all the time, why am I having to listen to all these lefties on GB News? And we say, because that's much more fun. Whereas at the BBC, you know that anybody that is centre-right or thinks differently to the steps outside of the Overton window of what is acceptable to say on whatever particular topic it is, they're going to be the butt of the joke at BBC News. And while they are like that, they're also laughing at the public, and the public are not stupid. Yeah, well said. And actually, I say to my producers all the time, you know, Bev, I'd rather do 2 hours of arguing and debating with people I disagree with completely, because maybe I'll learn something. Correct. Maybe they'll learn something. You know, I don't want to live in an echo chamber where we're just regurgitating other people's ideas. All perspectives, you know, make us a better society, better informed people. And I know Tim Davie, I know Deborah Turner personally. They're not bad people. I don't wish them any harm as individuals. I wish them nothing but luck in the rest of their, what will probably be successful careers. But there needed to be consequences in 2025. And there needs to be massive questions asked about who is the BBC and who are they talking to, because they're not talking to the British public. Yeah, OK, well said, Bev. Thank you very much, and great work today. Hopefully lots more in the week to come tomorrow. Well, joining me now to discuss the rest of this bombshell story is the associate editor at the Daily Telegraph, Gordon Rayner. I mean, the Telegraph, of course, key to this story, key to, I mean, some people, Gordon, good evening, thanks for your company, saying that it was also the Telegraph which has delivered this fatal blow to the BBC. Just tell us, please, how it's been from your side of things in the newsroom this week in London, and how it's all sort of manifested.
Well, I mean, it's been non-stop. You know, GB News has done a very good job of keeping across this story. We thank you for that. It felt, I think I probably said this to Bev earlier in the week, it felt as though Tim Davies' position was pretty much untenable from the moment that we revealed that Panorama documentary fakery, as Donald Trump refers to it. Because he, not only did he know about this quite some time ago, but he's the guy who was in charge of the organisation, has been for 5 years, who has allowed this culture to develop at the BBC, where, very much as Bev was saying there, people who work at the BBC think they can get away with this sort of thing because they think the boss won't care and won't do anything about it. And that's why they've got themselves into this awful position that they're in now.
Yeah, and Gordon, I don't want to do sort of a victory lap of backslapping, but President Trump, well, Caroline Levitt rather, his press secretary, mentioned GBNews today, but President Trump himself in his Truth Social tweet heaped praise on your publication, the Daily Telegraph. Do you feel like you're doing a service to the great British public here? I mean, do you feel bad in any way for bringing down the BBC, or I mean, do they deserve it?
Well, we haven't brought down the BBC, and I take no pleasure from people losing their jobs, and I really mean that. But I think, as Bev said, and as you were saying earlier, the BBC is something which has been cherished by the British people for a long time. I grew up with watching the BBC. I'm very proud of the fact that people in foreign countries always used to say, "Oh, you've got the best TV in the world in Britain. You've got the BBC. It's great." The World Service has been this incredible thing that people in repressed societies around the world could turn to get, what they thought was going to be impartial news. And that's what I'd like to see continuing. I don't think it's necessarily lost forever, but it's not happening at the moment. And whoever replaces Tim Davie has got a big job on their hands to restore that trust, that impartiality that is meant to be the absolute foundation of the BBC.
Yeah, and Gordon, I'd just like your thoughts finally on whether you think this is the end of the matter. Of course, we all know President Trump doesn't drop grudges quite easily. He's had 2 scalps today with the resignations, which he's posted on his Truth Social. He seems, I guess, happy with what's happened. Will he now, though, do you think, consider maybe suing the BBC, as he's done with CBS and ABC News here in America?
Okay, I think that's entirely possible. I suspect that part of the reason that he took so long to respond, as you were talking about earlier, was, there's been a lot going on in America, obviously, with the budget not being passed. I think maybe that they were just, had other things on their minds for most of the week. I suspect he's not necessarily going to let this go. I also think that this may not be the end of the resignations, because the people that made that Panorama program behind this story, we've heard nothing about what's happening to them. And also Jonathan Munro, who is the head of global news at the BBC. He's responsible for, BBC Arabic, for example, which we've been talking about with the bias in their reporting. He's the guy that in a meeting where the Panorama program was discussed, said there wasn't a problem. The British people had not been misled, and it was just normal editing. Well, if that's what he thinks, then I'm not sure he's in the right job.
Just, Gordon, one more. Thank you for your time. You're being very generous. But do you think Downing Street's been involved at all this week with the Trump White House? Do you think President Trump would have given Keir Starmer a heads up, bearing in mind for the simple fact that it's the state broadcaster and so on? Any involvement, any word on the street in Westminster?
I don't know the answer to that. I think that Downing Street has obviously been watching this story developing. We know that Lisa Nandy has been looking at it. She has made it very clear to the BBC that they needed to do something, that they needed to take our reporting seriously. As to whether or not Starmer and Donald Trump spoke about it, I don't know.
Yeah. Gordon, thank you very much. Really appreciate your company tonight. Great work at the Telegraph, you and your reporters, and we'll catch up soon. Thanks very much. That's Gordon Rayner, Associate Editor at the Daily Telegraph. Right, let us know your thoughts. gbnews.com/your say. The big question for me, guys at home, viewers and listeners, is, as I just asked Gordon, will President Trump now pursue some legal action against the BBC? He's done it with ABC News here in America. $16 million he settled for. He did it with CBS News, another $16 million as well. gbnews.com/your say. Keep those coming in.